And welcome back to this very special edition of Encounters 2020 and to this Q&A session for the series of short films under the banner Love, Life, Riffs and Rage in the Time of COVID. I'm Shamila Sidat and I'm a documentary filmmaker and also a very proud member of the DFA. And I must say that I'm super delighted and feel super privileged to moderate this Q&A with our very special guest directors this evening. So just to tell you a little bit about our directors, we have with us Sihle Shlope, the director of Ledile Under Lockdown, and Jason Howes, the director of The Best and the Worst of Us. Unfortunately, Shalilo Wahamuzila could not join us tonight. That's the director of Silent Panic, but welcome all of you. I'll just say a little bit about our directors here. Sihle Shlope is a multi-award winning filmmaker who over the last 11 years has received various accolades. These include 2 narrative short films that have screened across the world, and a recent co-production was a short film called Sadla, which screened at Sundance and TIFF. So welcome, Sihle. And there we also have Jason Howes, who's worked for over 10 years in film and television. Jason works as a cinematographer and a director, and his short film called Pula won at Josie Film Festival in 2008 and has shown in competition across the world as well. So before jumping straight into the Q&A with our guest directors, I'd like to say something about how these films came into being. So as a result of the pandemic, the DFA put out a call to filmmakers, to local filmmakers, to send story ideas for the times of COVID. And these were the winning filmmakers who then went on to make their films. So I think it's really remarkable that all of you have conceived of these films, have filmed, have produced, have filmed, and have edited during the time of Corona and lockdown. And I think it goes without saying that this is very relevant and profound filmmaking in that you're not only being a storyteller, but you're also being a chronicler documenting the virus's impact and doing this all during a time where you're embarking on a new mode of filmmaking. So I think what I'll do is I'll turn to our 2 filmmakers and I'll start by asking a few questions, 1 or 2 questions while the audience warms up and sends their questions as well. So I'll start with you, Sihle, the director of Ledile Under Lockdown. I mean, congratulations. You've presented us with a powerful, haunting, very inside, intimate account of life as an undocumented migrant in detention, specifically during COVID, but also in general. And your film, I mean, it was breathtaking. It was really, I found, for me, it was really stark, very tightly edited and really very effective. So maybe if you could just start by telling us a little bit about why you were drawn to telling this particular story, why it's important to you, and just a little bit about how it came about.
Right. So, sure. Why and how it came about is I've always known about Ledile. Well, I found out about it in around 2005. And I always heard stories about it. Oh, it's a place that people fear going to and so forth. But never had been there. And then when the lockdown started, I started seeing news reports about people escaping and some kind of liquidation going on there. Then I heard about the 350 grant, and I found out that if you're a migrant, you're not eligible to get that grant, and you also can't get tested for COVID for free if you don't have a passport number, and then you can't leave the country, but you also can't make a living. So it was a nightmarish situation to be in. So when I heard about the grant, I was like, you know, then I need to tell the story of Ledile, and I need to confront that place and find out exactly what's going on there. And that's just how the journey began. And I tried to get the authorities, tried to interview them, tried to get something from them and couldn't. And that's why we went the way we went then with the leaked footage and so forth. Yeah.
maybe I'll stick with you for one more question, and then we'll move to you, Jason, and we'll go back and forth while people also warm up and send questions. So audience, please feel free to send questions. So tell us a little bit about how you came about to choosing the characters, your two main characters.
Okay, so my co-producer is friends with a guy who is from Tanzania, and he had said that during the lockdown, his younger brother had gotten detained, even though I think his documents had just expired. But he told us that he was inside Lindela and he had no idea when he'd be able to get out, but somehow he had a phone. And he gave us this guy's phone number, and we're like, what? So we then proceeded to call the guy. Hi, how are you? As we're speaking to him, then our character grabbed the phone from him and was like, if you are human rights, please hear me. Like, we need help right now. This is the situation and we're gonna strike soon. So please come through. And yeah, the timing, everything just fell into place. Yeah, that's how we chose him. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you, Sihle. I thought we'll just bring in Jason let you off the hook a little bit and bring in Jason with one or two questions and then get back to you, Sihle. Jason, I mean, your film, The Best and Worst for Us, I mean, you've presented us with a very interesting and engaging sort of a road trip, may I say, through the lens of a photojournalist who, brings together sort of different parts of a very undivided and unequal city. And through his journeys, you also bring into focus some of the very harsh consequences of the lockdown. And there's a lot of immediacy in the way you tell your story, and a lot of bigger aspects of the lockdown that are also brought into the film. Maybe you can start off by telling us as well why you were drawn to making this film, why you wanted to tell the story in this way through the vehicle of the photojournalist. And as I understand, he might be there with you. So if you want to introduce him as well.
Sure. To be honest with you, when the brief came out from the DFA, I literally wrote my treatment for the brief like within 10 minutes of reading it, because I immediately was inspired and knew that all of those sort of key words of life, love, riffs, and rage, I immediately started to get visuals in my mind that I know that I had seen through the work of Armand. And so it was just a very organic and a very natural process of kind of like, it just all kind of fell into place. It was quite serendipitous. And obviously, then trying to get hold of him and stuff like that, I got very lucky because not only did I find somebody that had all the material, but I also had a very strong character in him, somebody that could drive the story and that we could experience the story through. And he speaks really well on camera. He's very active on camera. And that's very helpful because he sort of kind of then bridges that gap between photojournalist and TV journalist. And it just kind of became this really cool marriage. So it all fell into place. It was actually a very easy process to get the story told because so much of it was there already and it was just so immediately available online and very fresh in people's minds. So I thought, the best way to approach it was to treat it like a reflection, so he reflected on a lot of those experiences. And I think it made it more powerful that way because, in hindsight, things take on new meaning. They take on a new life, and he was definitely the right person to bring that to life because he's clearly a very emotional person. And that was important because this time was filled with so much uncertainty and so much raw emotion from people as we've seen in all of the films. And so, yeah, I mean, I was very lucky and I was just very specifically like inspired by what he was doing.
Can you tell us a little bit about your process of filmmaking during lockdown and how it might have impacted on some of the filmmaking choices?
Okay, well, are you talking about in the making of this particular film during lockdown? Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it was tricky. So, I mean, the joy of making documentaries is that you can do it in a very sort of tight, small group of people can make this film, So it was only myself and cinematographer Felix Soifert who shot with Armand. We shot with him for 2 days and we just used that. We just basically we treated it as if going out with him for a couple of days and covering some stories and meeting with particular people that I knew that he had had engagements with already and that we had pre-existing footage with already. We were very lucky because we knew that we were largely going to rely on what was essentially archive material. So his photography and a lot of the mobile phone footage that he himself shot, all stuff that he was actually sent via WhatsApp groups and stuff like that. So we just needed to fill in those blank spaces with the narrative that would help us kind of, one, create a bit of a character out of him and build on that sort of reflective concept with him. So, you know, with documentary filmmaking, it's always great because you can do a lot with very little. And I that's what I love about the format. So, you know, it was a really great experience, and we could be so intimate with the experience while still adhering to like COVID-19 regulations and all that kind of stuff, and get like really interesting and almost like fly on the wall kind of material. You know, it didn't feel too strictly documentary. It did feel like we were deconstructing the format a little bit in the way that we approached it, which was interesting for me. That's what I found most interesting about it.
Okay, thanks for that, Jason. Sishla, if you could tell us a little bit as well about your process of filmmaking and how that impacted some of your filmmaking choices. We saw that you brought together, you know, very interesting types of materials. If you can tell us a little bit about that, and then some questions have come in that we'll follow that up with.
Okay, so for me, what was interesting was I had to find a way to get the information from inside Lindela, and I had to direct our main character over the phone. And we're speaking through voice notes, build a relationship, build trust through voice notes, and through just trying to tell him, please, can you try and articulate this in a short space of time? And also, please, can you upload the videos and send them to us immediately as you record? Because actually his phone was taken away from him during the strike. So if he hadn't sent those videos to us immediately on the go, we wouldn't have received them. We wouldn't have received all the material that we had. And also with the COVID regulations, as you say, it was quite challenging. We had a small crew of 3. We couldn't have any assistance or anything like that. So we had to have all the PPE. That changes your budget completely. I now have my own thermometer. So, you know, like these are things that weren't like conscious of. And even when David came out of Lindela, for me, it was still a concern because they didn't quarantine him for 14 days. They just let him out into the world, you know, and just gave him a mask, out you go. So that was also another risk for all of us, you know, him not knowing if he has it or not. So yeah, I can say that shooting under lockdown presented its own set of challenges, but also working remotely and learning that there are things that you can do with less if you need to, yeah.
It still also makes for very interesting filmmaking. So we have a question here for both our directors. One is, both of you filmed in environments where you face certain risks, or even just hanging outside of Lindela. Were you ever concerned or afraid? Does having to complete a film in such a short time make the filmmaking process easier or more difficult? So those are 2 questions from Morgan Morris. Shall we go over to Jason first and then Sishla after?
Okay, so just so I understand, there's 2 questions there. The one is, were we ever afraid? I'm actually going to bring my character in for that one. He can reflect on that because he's always in the thick of it. And then I'll answer the question about making it in a short space of time, if that's okay. So the question is, so we filmed in a lot of places that Armand obviously has been to before and is familiar with. But of course, you know, during this time and because of the anxiety and whatnot, yes, there is an element of, I suppose, uncertainty that you feel because people are in a heightened sense or a heightened state of being because they're in this very sort of anxious state and a lot of things are uncertain, and there's been a lot of like, you know, police activity that has brought a lot of, violence into the area and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think, dude? I mean, how do you handle it?
Well, filming documentaries, and I won't describe myself as a filmmaker, but more as a photojournalist and a documentary photographer, then I focus more on stills. So So, so doing documentaries is always a bit of a risk. I know Jason asked me when they wanted to come with me for 2 days, is everything going to be safe? Is it going to be okay? We're going to bring a cinematographer into the picture as well. And I couldn't give a straight answer. I couldn't say like, yeah, no worries, you know, because we are going to volatile areas, and especially within COVID, it is more volatile. We never went to situations where it was too dangerous, but there were always this little thing.
Exactly.
And luckily we came safe out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I must say, like I felt incredibly warmly welcomed in every instance that we were in, whether it was in Hangberg or in Lavender Hill or wherever it might be. We felt welcomed, and we didn't feel at all. We felt like we really had the participation and the sort of the what is the word? I wouldn't say permission, but it was like consent. Yeah, the consent of the communities that we were in. You know, there was consent for us being there. And
I'm sorry if I can interrupt here, but also. During covering COVID, the people that I've met during this whole process was welcoming, and they were appreciative of their stories being told. So they I mean, like there was this instance in Lavender Hill where Mark Nicholson, where he took us into where the 3 gangs usually battle. So that's between the flats and everything. And you know, we had to rely on Mark and people knowing Mark, and so he took us around there, and it was beautiful that we did feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to get a glimpse into the life of the people staying there, and the everyday life that the people have to endure there. Absolutely. So it's always beautiful doing documentaries and doing raw real life within these instances, and you know, circumventing the situations that we go through.
For sure, and in answering the second question about whether or not it's challenging to make a film like this in a short space of time, absolutely yes, it is. I most certainly, I mean, I think, you know, I knew going into it that I had a lot more footage than what I needed, and I know that we had to stick to a particular like length for the films and stuff like that, but I kind of had to secretly ignore that because there was just a lot of really good stuff to get, and it would be a waste not to get it. And I'm glad I did, because now we have the potential to make a longer film if we want to, and that could potentially go to broadcast. So yes, but in the making of this film, yes, very challenging. Only barely made the deadline, but had a lot of support from the DFA and from my co-producing partners and stuff like that. So it was achievable. But I will be lying if I said it wasn't stressful.
Well, you both did it, and here you are, a premiere on a Sunday night. So those 2 questions, were you ever afraid, and finishing the film in a short space of time?
Afraid, yes, very afraid. There's something like really dark about the place, the vibes, the energies, the aggression from the security guards. I mean, they took photos of our number plates. Obviously, they confiscated David's phone, which we're using to speak to him. The atrocities in there, the guilt, knowing that he's in there, we're outside. Yeah, no, still afraid. Talking to NGOs, but yeah. Even when we did, I'll tell you, I always say when we did the drone photography, I felt like my heart was going up into the sky as well, you know, but that was also from studying the place, sneaking around in the bushes, trying to figure out where the people are and so forth. Yeah, but fear, just had to face our fears and stand our ground, because there was a bigger cause and a bigger picture for the people inside. So yeah. And then the second question, yeah, shooting under like these conditions and in such a short space of time, yeah. Oh gosh, but we made it. It wasn't easy, but we made it. It's very possible with a good team, yeah.
I feel what she's saying. So another question, if I may ask you, Sihle, I thought you made a very interesting choice in your film.
Old school.
Okay, so hi, Sihle. I thought at the end of the film, there was a very interesting choice that the two brothers never got to chat to each other on the phone or meet each other up. And I just wanted to know whether that was, what your thinking was behind that, and then also what has happened between them.
Yeah, no, I think that when someone goes to Lindela, you assume that they'll get repatriated. That's what's supposed to happen. So we can only assume, which is also a bit unfair, that maybe Omar wasn't ready for David to be released, because he did and has been trying to contact him persistently, but hasn't been able to get hold of him. So that means David is out on his own and has to find his own way out there. And part of that is connecting with some of the other people that were released and, trying to make do. But he still hasn't managed to get hold of Omar.
And maybe while you're speaking about your film, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what you would like the audience to feel, if anything, from watching this film, or what in your own words you want to say with this film.
I want to say that being an undocumented migrant does not make you a criminal. So I don't understand why people are being treated like this at Lindela. I want to say that somehow the truth always comes to light, because nobody has ever been allowed to film inside Lindela, only the SABC, and then again, it's only from far. So somehow the truth will come to light, and it's not fair that they have children in there, that they have women in there as well, and just whatever's happening there just needs to stop. It just needs to come to an end. And as South Africans, we need to know that, not only is it bad being a non-South African on the outside, those same xenophobic attitudes are reflected in how people are treated when they go into the system. And the people that are detained are, people that are trying to make a living in the informal economy, people that are selling your vegetables, there are all kinds of people there, but the treatment just doesn't make sense. I don't understand why people need to be detained like this. And we need to see if there are other ways besides detention that we can deal with the migration issue, because actually Africa should be for all, We shouldn't be treating each other like this. And you won't find your so-called expats or migrants from the global north at Lindela. It's mostly Africans. And for me, that's problematic. Yeah.
Well, that's another reason why it's such an important film. Jason, we'll move to you. And we've got a question for both of you. I'll pose it to you first. The question is, will COVID be an ongoing theme for you? Or do you think the moment of interest among the audience will pass quickly?
I don't know if strictly COVID will continue to be a theme for me, but I think a lot of other things will come out of this, which will pose their own sort of thematic reason for being. Because, there's now all of the ripple effect, right? And what's ultimately going to happen to people's lives, and whether it's inspiring people to do things differently, or whether it's, revealing more of the insecurities that we live in, whatever it might be. I think, there's going to be a lot of interesting things coming out of this that will be a byproduct of COVID rather than actually being COVID itself, which is going to be very interesting. So a very interesting time to be alive and moving into the next 5 years. Definitely.
And Jason, we'll stay with you. A big part of your film was also people who were stepping up to do something about the pandemic. Maybe if you can speak a little bit about that, and maybe you can also tell us which part of the emotion that you identified with the most in your film. We're also interested in the relationship between your point of view and the character's point of view. But I guess there's two questions there. If you could speak a little bit about both.
Okay, so just remind me, the first question is...
The first question is, the film shows people who are stepping up to do something. Maybe if you can speak a little bit about.
I think I want to bring Armand in for this, because obviously one of the most inspiring things about his story and how he engaged with his social media during this time was, he bridged that gap, where, typically he would have taken quite an objective stance on things. He's now actually, trying to actively help people. He's seeing a need for help and he's doing what he can. And it was quite inspiring and very much the reason why I thought his story was a great one to tell. So, there was many people that you came across during this time. Some of them feature in the film. Obviously, there's many more, whether it's corporates or whatever. But do you want to talk a bit to that about the, what this whole time elicited in terms of people stepping up to the plate and trying to help?
Well, I personally, being a photojournalist before lockdown, I just try to cover the things that I saw the whole time, see what's going on, and present that as news in newspapers and so forth. But what I saw is people close to me and in informal settlements that's really like devoting their lives completely to helping others and to seeing what's happening in their communities and even in other communities and doing something about it. So that inspired me tremendously, where I thought to myself that I can't just do photography for profit anymore. I need to help as well. So all these people that I've met really meant something in my life and it changed me. So I'm really thankful for them for doing that to me, because I feel kind of like a better person for that. Everybody can always do more. But I do feel that I've started doing something, and that hopefully will inspire other people as well to do something. But the people that I've met it was heartbreaking, and it was beautiful to see that they, trying to adhere to lockdown regulations and rules, but to saying that there's more important things, and that is to feed people, and that is to clothe people, and that is to protect other people. And that was just very, very inspiring. And it happened quite harmoniously that you can't deny that. I mean, like we see these people doing so much, and you don't do something yourself, then there might be something wrong with you. So it wasn't a choice. It was something that happened, and I went with the flow of things, and I'm really grateful for, and don't misquote me on this. I'm really grateful for this process of lockdown, because it changed a lot of people in my surrounding, and I'm not obviously I'm just very fortunate for the opportunity that it changed me.
And then there's a second question around how I was affected by it emotionally. I think, for me, obviously, the fact that my character was so openly emotional and in a very raw and real way and an authentic way, because, for instance, some of what you see in the film of the footage of him, like, for instance, there's where he's talking about how he was affected by seeing the people raiding the truck. That particular video clip he filmed on that day in the car on his own. He never put that on any form of social media. He didn't, it wasn't like, he didn't even know if he was ever going to show it to anyone. So that experience that he was having in that moment was truly authentic. And it was like, to be able to share that in the film was a huge emotional thing for me, because I was like, wow, that is a truly authentic moment. There is no agenda attached to that. That is a person sharing their raw experience of something that clearly had an impact. And that, I think this film, there's a lot of that going on, because you're seeing how, like, people are engaging with their emotions, whether it's negative emotions, whether it's positive emotions. They're actively taking this time to engage with their emotions about how they feel about things and how they're wanting to change things and how they're willing to fight for things. And, that to me it inspires me. It makes me think that, there's a lot of incredible people out there that put themselves in harm's way to help other people, and they deserve to be spoken about. And, we have to try and, get their stories out there the best way we can. He does an amazing job of it. And I just came along to be like, let's put it together in a film and show people. So that was, for me, that was the greatest emotional reward. So yeah.
Great, thanks.
No.
We've got two questions that have come up, and we're actually running out of time, unfortunately, but I will put these two questions to you. And the first one, well, it says, amazing film from both Sihle and Jason. The question is, what positive changes and impact are they hoping their films will achieve in improving the current situation in South Africa? I know, Jason, you've already spoken a little bit about it, but we can go ahead. Sihle, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, so basically, if the conditions at Lindela could change even slightly, if they can pay more attention to social distancing, if they can reduce the number of days that people are detained, the manner in which they treat people when they're in there, if they can stop using maximum force and physically assaulting the deportees. Those are the kind of changes I'd like to see happening. Actually, I'd like to see much less people being detained at Lindela. I dream of a future where there are other ways of dealing with migration issues. So that's what I'd like to see. And somebody taking accountability for what's happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jason, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I mean, I think by default, there's people that are featured in this film that have either got organizations that already existed. So shedding another light on them and showing how much more they were taking on during this time to try and help people, and how we can play an active role in trying to assist. And so that's, in the coming weeks, I want to be able to roll out stuff attached to the film, like social media posts attached to the film, to try and like get a bit of a funding thing going on to try and help with some of these organizations. And then, of course, you know, somebody like Peter Wagner in Mully Point, who has literally turned a situation where his car got torched for feeding homeless people in his neighborhood, and is now turning that into a positive spin, and wants to use that vehicle as a symbol for dealing with you know, disagreements, and how you actually, I mean, what is it called? What is the organization called that he wants to start?
The Mini Meltdown.
The Mini Meltdown, he calls it. And he wants to, that mini now is going to become a symbol for how we can engage with each other on issues that we might not agree about. And now he's actually wanting to take that into schools and communities and stuff like that to really engage with people about that. And that would never have happened unless COVID happened, unless the community that he was in reacted. So it's weird how, you know, someone's hate can be turned into another person's love. And I think that that's something very powerful that's come out of this. And this film helps to shed light on that, you know. So my film is very much like a mixed bag of experiences from this time. But I think in every instance, there's somebody that truly inspires you to, like, I mean, if you think about Lee in Hangberg, this man is such an incredible community leader. He's at the forefront of actively changing that community, and now doing it in a way that engages with local governments, you know, within the sort of legal system, rather than, you know, using violent protest or anything like that. So there's like incredible, you know, people that are doing things here that need, you know, their stories to be told and exposed to the world, because otherwise, you know, we just wouldn't know about these real life heroes, right? We just wouldn't know. This is the way we know. So that's the important thing.
Okay, great. And time for one last question before we'll have to wrap up. So I'll ask the question, and if you also want to say anything else, please do. So the question is, I think, leaving the hardest for the last. Someone asks, I'd like this microfinancing model that the DFA offered, as it's flexible and allows for almost immediate responsive filmmaking. As filmmakers, would you prefer more of these, or rather the larger, more long-term funding models that appear to be standard in South Africa? So,
yeah.
Sihle, you go.
I feel like this kind of funding model is also really important, because things happen immediately. sometimes, and they need to be documented as and when they happen. So with a longer term financing, I find that that's the problem. And even if you look at the DTI, how they say that you mustn't shoot anything before principal photography. With documentary, you need to shoot during research, you need to shoot during development. If anything happens, you need to drop everything and go shoot immediately. So if there were more organizations that would look into this kind of model, that would be fantastic.
Very much agree, and I think it's a balance of the two. I think obviously it depends on the scope of your project and how big it is. So sometimes you need more funding to really get it where it needs to be, or whatever. You know, some stories are much bigger than maybe we'd like them to be in terms of what they would cost to make. But I think activating filmmakers like this with such a fast turnaround is great. I think it's very contemporary as well, because it keeps the content fresh, and it keeps a stream of content going, which I think is relevant now, so that you can constantly get stuff getting out there. And I think it also, you know, what it did was, and it was very much needed during this time, was it got us off the couch. Because, you know, this literally, I mean, I wouldn't have made this film if the DFA hadn't put out this brief. It's very much, you know, thankful to them for that. And I hope for more of this, because, you know, sometimes this is the push you need, right? You just need something to spark an idea, and it doesn't always originate from yourself. Sometimes it needs to come from somewhere else. I mean, even just reading the brief in this particular instance was the inspiration. I had a spark. I was like, you know, no brief, no spark. So I think, yes, definitely more of this, to turn around films quicker is always great. I just remember next time to try and keep it a bit shorter.
And I'm going to bring in, well, that's wise words for everybody from both of you. I'm also like to bring in Mickey Redenlinghuis from the DFA to speak a little bit about this issue, if I may, and then we'll close up after that.
Yeah, I just actually wanted to respond to Morgan's question about the microfinancing, and thanks everybody for engaging so enthusiastically on a Sunday night. And thanks so much to the filmmakers. And just to say that, you know, when COVID was happening and we were in lockdown 3 and the DFA board got together and we have to do something. At that stage, relief funding wasn't reaching filmmakers yet, and people were despondent and people were unemployed and stories were happening. And we knew that people were already out documenting stories and didn't have any support. So it was really a response to that. And it was definitely a unanimous decision by the board to support this initiative. And we're very excited about the way people did respond. And I think the films that we saw tonight, and there were 5 films, but 3 of them were ready for encounters. The other 2 should, I hope, be ready by the end of September, and we'll find a platform for them. But I really think the films answered to that brief, and we're really excited about what's been achieved here. And I know the money that the DFA made available is certainly not enough to sustain filmmakers, but it was like we saw it as a ray of hope and creating an opportunity. And I thank Morgan for recognizing it as potentially a model for microfinancing. And I think we need to be thinking of, you know, this COVID is going to change the way we think about finding funds and finding platforms to show our film, and we're going to have to think more collectively. And so, yeah, I'm very excited actually about what we achieved. And thanks for being here, and thanks for hosting this, Shamila. It was a great session.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to hide again in the background.
Well,
all right.
You can stay with us. Well, I think, unfortunately, time has come to an end. So on behalf of the DFA, on behalf of Encounters, I would like to thank both of you, all of you, for sharing your films and for staying for the Q&A. It was very interesting. And we wish you luck with your film, and we hope to see it over and over again in many other venues. So best of luck, and thank you again for being part of this filmmaking at a very urgent and relevant and profound moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Beautiful film.
Thank you, Sifa. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Shamila. Bye-bye.
Bye. Come in.
7:32.
Yeah, we've got Malu and Pumlani. Oh, they can.